Good evening, everyone. The American Diabetes Association welcomes you to our virtual Safe at School Parent Workshop. We're so glad you're here. I am Crystal Woodward, National Director of ADA's Safe at School campaign, and I am also the mother of a daughter with type 1 diabetes, so I fully understand all of the challenges of returning to school. First off, I want to let you know that we are recording this session, and a link to this program will soon be made available on ADA's website and social media. Second, the information you are about to hear this evening does not constitute legal or medical advice. If you are seeking legal or medical advice, please contact an attorney and/or a licensed healthcare professional. The first part of this evening's session will provide an overview of Safe at School and will cover federal and state protections for students with diabetes. We'll talk about essential written plans like a diabetes medical management plan and a Section 504 plan. And we'll let you know how to access ADA's comprehensive online resources and tools. After the presentation, there will be time for questions and answers. As you're listening to this presentation, you're also invited to type your questions into the chat box so that everyone can see your questions. And we will go through and answer your questions as we receive them. And we will also have time at the conclusion of the program. ADA thanks Lilly Diabetes for its support of this Safe at School presentation. Now, to take us through this informative presentation, we have one of our stellar Safe at School advocate presenters and my friend and fellow T1D mom, Kathy Risk-Sego. Kathy has been an educator for 28 years, teaching in both private and public school systems. Kathy is a longtime volunteer for the American Diabetes Association and serves as Indiana's Safe at School advocate. She is currently a member of ADA's Safe at School Working Group. Kathy extends her knowledge to help school corporations, school nurses, fellow educators, and families by ensuring children living with diabetes receive needed diabetes care in the school setting and accommodations to ensure fair and equal treatment from schools. Kathy is married and has 2 children. Her son, Hunter, has had type 1 diabetes for 18 years. I now turn this evening's program over to Kathy. Welcome, Kathy, and thanks again. We're looking forward to your presentation tonight.
I'm really excited to be here and to go through some very important information that we as parents would like to have and need to know about. So we're going to start off with our mission statement that we need to get to. The ADA's mission is to prevent and cure diabetes and improve all lives of all people affected by diabetes. And we deliver this mission through research, information, and with support, with advocacy and public awareness. Today's program is going to focus on advocacy, and namely the association's Safe at School campaign, which I am so proud and happy to be involved with. And this will help prepare your student, your child with diabetes to go back to school with comfort of knowing that their diabetes needs will be taken care of and be safely met in school. Okay, we need to go to the Safe at School principles slide, please. I'm going to let her get caught up on the slides here. So we're going to talk about our Safe at School principles. ADA's Safe at School campaign is based on these 3 principles regarding diabetes management in school. All school staff members need to have basic knowledge of diabetes and know who to contact for help. At a minimum, everyone who has custodial responsibility for your child should understand diabetes and know how to recognize low and high blood sugars and know how to get help. The school nurse's primary provider of diabetes care, but other school personnel must be trained to perform diabetes care tasks when the school nurse is not present. These tasks include insulin and glucagon administration, glucose monitoring, carb counting, recognition and treatment of highs and low sugars. Students should be permitted to provide self-care whenever they are at school or school-related activities. This applies to students who possess the maturity level and skill set to do so. Here in Indiana, on your diabetes medical management plan, that is a question that is given to your doctor to fill out if they feel they're responsible enough to manage their diabetes on their own with some help if needed. And that it should be on your diabetes medical management plan if you have any questions about that. So we're going to talk about our Safe at School principles, and they're endorsed by many wonderful people. You got the American Academy of Pediatrics, clinical endocrinology. You could see the whole list here. This plan that has been worked on and been gone through with a fine-tooth comb by some of the best doctors and experts in the field. So I feel very confident in sharing this information with you. So goals for safety and fairness for your child. So we're going to talk about how the school must provide a medically safe environment for our students with diabetes. Schools adhere to Safe at School principles are best positioned to achieve these goals and to ensure the safety of your child while they are at school. As parents and our guardians of children with diabetes, we know it's important for our kids to have their diabetes management needs met to keep them safe and healthy in the classroom, and all school personnel need to know and at all school-sponsored events and activities. Here are 3 key goals for school diabetes care while at school. Schools must provide a medically safe environment for our children, and schools must provide someone that's trained in our buildings, in those school buildings. Our children must have the same access of educational and school-related activities as their classmates without diabetes. Schools and parents need to work together to support the gradual transition to independence for children with diabetes, as we all know that diabetes is a self-managed chronic condition. So if you have a student that's young and still learning to manage on their own, it's great to have a school nurse to work with your child to help them gain that independence so that they can learn to be more self-sufficient if that's possible at school and at home as well. One example of this may be if your child is deemed independent in their diabetes care, they should be allowed to check their glucose in the classroom to avoid disrupting and learning. As a teacher and also as a mom of a lovely young man who has type 1, we know it's so important for our students to be, I call it seat time. They need to be in the classroom and they need to stay in the classroom as much as possible. So as much as we can manage and take care of their diabetes in the classroom, not only is it healthier for them because there's not so much traveling, and it's just smarter for our kids to be in the classroom where they're still gaining the knowledge and not missing critical learning material. So it's very important. So what we know, as parents, we know a lot, and guardians, we know that diabetes is a 24/7 management, and our children can never take a break. I always say diabetes does not take a time out, a vacation. It's always present. Parents and guardians should work with their child's school to ensure a smooth coordination of diabetes management between home and school. For example, if your child self-manages at home, it is a reasonable expectation that your child will self-manage at school. However, recognize that the home and school settings vary. You may change your child's pump infusion site at home, but your school nurse or school staff can elect to use a backup plan insulin pen excuse me, in case of a pump malfunction. You may be able to make treatment decisions based on CGM data, your continuous glucose monitoring data at home. But a school nurse or a school staff member is not as well versed as we are knowing how to interpret and understand that data. They cannot be expected to respond to every data point like we do at home. Parents and guardians need to make sure the school clinic has all supplies needed to care for your child. Independent students may carry their own supplies, but it's usually a good idea to have backup of supplies of insulin, glucagon, test strips, excuse me, as well as snacks in the clinic. Pardon me. That is one thing that I know as a teacher and also as a parent of a type 1. This is a continuous issue with a lot of situations at school. It is your responsibility to make sure that the school nurse, that the school has all those supplies needed in case your child forgets their meter or their insulin or something at home, that there is a backup supplies at school, low blood sugars, all that. Fluctuating out of blood glucose levels may negatively affect learning and behavior. Students with diabetes may make accommodations to address this, such as extended time for homework and class assignments. So as a teacher, if one of my kids' blood sugar is too high, I recognize this and I say, you know what, we're going to take that test another time or quiz, or if they were having a sick day with their diabetes, that we extend that time for them to turn in their homework, or just give them some grace. Some teachers are not always that accommodating. And I think a lot of times we got to step in and just gently and kindly educate them, because a lot of times they just don't know. And if you're calm and you come in calm and talk about it, that situation can be rectified pretty quickly. Parents and guardians should make sure written care plans are included in the 504 plan and diabetes medical management plan, and that they're developed before the school year begins and before your child returns to school after a diagnosis. It's so important that 504 or IEP is all settled up before the first day of school. I cannot say that enough. And I know that as an educator, we are busy. I'm at school right now because we're busy getting ready, but we need to take the time. So just send an email to your school counselor, your school nurse, your principal today, and just say, hey, I want to be sure that we're all set up with our 504 plan for the next school year. I just want to make it easier because once school starts, I know it gets crazy. So let's move on to the next slide here. What does your child need at school to manage his or her diabetes? So they need timely access to a school nurse. They need trained staff to recognize and treat high and lows, school-based emotional support and psychological services as needed. A lot of times our kids have a hard time adjusting with living with diabetes. Proper physical distancing measures and or virtual learning if that's necessary. Self-management permitted for capable students. Your child should be, if they're capable of managing on their own and carrying their supplies, they should be allowed to do that without question. Full and safe participation in all school-sponsored activities. All school-sponsored activities, after school dances, field trips, all that. Access to accurate carbohydrate and nutrition information. Your school cafeteria should supply yourself with a calendar of the meals for the month and what those carb counts are so you can plan ahead. Access to supplies, equipment, medication, and food. All those things should be available. So let's talk about back to school strategies. Parents and guardians of children with diabetes have some extra things that they have to take care of. You know, we need to approach everything in the spirit of cooperation and work with the school team. And you've got to be kind about it. You just can't come in and just be demanding. You know, my grandma always said you catch more bees with honey. So start off that everything is going to be great and work together. Your child will be in a school for a very long time, and it's dependent upon the school nurse and staff for help and support. So you don't want to burn those bridges. Work toward a shared goal of keeping your child safe, healthy, and best positioned for success. Can we move to the slide, Mandy, please? Thank you. You need to be realistic too. We are all human, and please remember to be reasonable. Listen to the school's concerns and be ready to brainstorm to come up with practical solutions. Most of the time, I can say this because I know as a teacher, we do have the best interest of our students at heart. A lot of times we just need more information and you to explain the situation to us and for us to accommodate your student. We just need to know. Listen to the school's concerns and communication early and often with school personnel who will be in direct contact with your child, including the bus driver, athletic coaches, and other special interest teachers and advisors. I always think that communication by email is great because we're so busy at school teaching that a lot of times in between classes, but I teach high school, in between my passing periods, I can usually send off an email, not always, but sometimes that's the best way to communicate instead of calling. And also you have a record of you trying to talk with the school staffs. That way you have that paper trail as well. Be your child's advocate, but maintain an open mind and willingness to listen to other concerns. You need to provide a complete kit of current, clearly labeled supplies, snacks, including complex carbohydrates like peanut butter and crackers, and fast-acting forms of carbohydrates like glucose tabs and juice. I always kept a lockdown box. I made one out of a pencil box for everyone. My son's classes that he went to just included, the juice and glucose tabs. I always stuck Airheads in there. Sometimes I quit doing peanut butter crackers due to allergies, but so I stuck in like maybe cheese crackers or something to have in that kit. So if there was a lockdown or anything that was readily available as well. And then it also, if he ran out of supplies himself, that he had some backup in one room. Encourage your child to wear a form of medical identification in case there is an emergency and they go down in the hallway or somewhere else. The school nurse is a coordinator of care at school, but often parents and guardians are aware of a problem or challenge before the school nurse has any knowledge of it at all. And I will say this because we are in the age of cell phones. Your child, my child, would send me a text or call me from the bathroom to say so-and-so did this, teacher did this, before the teacher or the school nurse even knew something was wrong. So if you get that call from your child, just take a breath and let the school nurse say, hey, I don't think you're aware, but this situation happened. That's the best way to handle it. You need to keep the lines of communication open and provide the information that the nurse needs to make accommodations in that care plan at school. Build trust so you can bring concerns to the attention of the nurse and be willing to be a part of the solution. If you work as a team, it's best for your child. Always try to work as a team. So let's talk about legal protections. Understand relevant federal and state laws that provide legal protections for students with diabetes and place legal obligations upon schools to provide appropriate diabetes care to your child and to make sure your child is treated fairly. So let's talk about federal and state laws and how those work. There are federal laws and some states have laws that provide protections with children with diabetes. I strongly encourage you to go to the ADA's website to learn more about these laws and understand how they work and how they can use these laws to ensure your child's diabetes management needs to be met during the school day. and at all school-sponsored activities, including field trips, dances, extracurricular, track, show choir, all those great things. And that's at diabetes.org/safe at school. So a word about your child's rights and COVID. It's important to remember that students with diabetes have legal rights that do not go away during a global pandemic. And students with diabetes should have a 504 or an IEP or other written accommodation plan even during a global pandemic. Students with diabetes cannot be excluded from school-sponsored activities because of their diabetes. Individual assessment is required. So if your child wants to go virtual, if they want to go virtual, that should be an option if the school has that option for you without question. So let's go to the next slide. So relevant federal laws. So we got the Section 504, our 504s, our Americans Disability Act, and our IEPs, our IDEA. So let's do a quick summary here. So the 504, it's good for public and private schools, including religious schools that receive federal funds, have legal obligations to provide diabetes care under Section 504. I always say if your private school is getting cheese, Title I money, anything like that, then they definitely are held to the 504. Under the law, diabetes is a disability that substantially limits a number of major life activities such as walking, talking, eating, or endocrine function. The major life activities substantially limited does not need to be learning for a 504. Students who qualify for services under Section 504 should work with the school to develop a 504 plan. We will talk more about a 504 plan later here. Now, the ADA, it applies the same way as a Section 504, but it also applies to daycares, camp, and recreation programs. Religious operated schools and programs do not have legal obligations under the ADA. A written accommodation plan should be put in place for students and children who are eligible under ADA. Now, IDEA or IEPs, this is a special educational law. So some of our students may also have diabetes, but also may have been diagnosed with a learning disability or some other things that would impact their learning. So it must be demonstrated that diabetes or another disability adversely impacts a student's ability to learn and make academic progress. If diabetes does adversely and significantly impact your child's ability to learn, your child may qualify for an IEP. So state laws and regulations. State laws, we're lucky in Indiana, we do have a state law. While all schools must comply with a federal law that I just spoke about, there are state law accommodations, and states have nurse practice acts and other laws and regulations that speak to who may or may not provide care for students with diabetes. To add to the confusion of this all, some policies and practices differ within school districts. If you're from Indiana, you know that is very true. And some states have developed school diabetes management guidelines. Check the association's website to see if your state has such guidelines. Regardless of state law, the requirements of federal law must be met. Federal law is number one. This means if you live in a state that only allows a school nurse to provide care, then a nurse must be available at all times, not just part-time. And the school nurse must go on field trips and attend all extracurricular activities where your child is a participant, not just a spectator. Some states have passed specific school diabetes care laws or changed relevant Board of Nursing regulations to enable trained school staff members to provide care for our students with diabetes. And we have that here in Indiana. You can learn more about that at the diabetes.org/ safe at school. So information about Indiana laws. So a school principal is required to recruit school staff to volunteer to be trained to provide diabetes care, including insulin and glucagon administration. These staff members are called volunteered unlicensed health aides. They're also called just volunteer health aides here. So training of volunteer health aides must be provided by a qualified healthcare professional. So if you are a small school and you have one school nurse for a district, she can train other people in the building to be a trained health aide. Indiana law allows students to self-manage their diabetes and carry their supplies with them. If you'll see, there's a URL on our website that can allow that to get more information for you. So let's go to the next one. Key tips for Indiana parents and guardians. So here are some actions that you can take to make sure your child is safe at school. Make sure your child's treatment plan, the Diabetes Medical Management Plan, the DMMP, are current and complete. So a lot of you doctors at Peyton Manning's Children's Hospital or Riley's Children's Hospital, if you're from Southern Indiana, you might be going to Cincinnati's Children's Hospital up north, up near Chicago, up at the Children's Hospital up there. You need to be sure that you have that appointment and that you've already contacted your certified diabetes educator, your CDE, and getting that diabetes management medical plan, the DMMP, done, and get that in your hand or have that faxed to your school nurse before the start of school. Make sure that it contains specific schedules and orders for the frequency of giving insulin and current dosages of insulin or to carbohydrate ratios. Know which staff have been trained to provide diabetes care for your child. So remember, California law allows teachers and other school staff to be trained to give insulin and glucagon. Same here in Indiana. We can train school staff to do that. I have staff members here that are trained to take care of kids with diabetes when the school nurse isn't around. Be a resource for your school. While it is the school or school district's responsibility to train the staff, you may also know somebody in the building where your child is attending and you know that they are aware of diabetes and how to manage it, or that they're willing to step up and help your child or another child. So help the school and contact the principal and say, hey, I know this person is willing to do that. And there are training resources such as the ADA's school modules, which is also on the diabetes.org/school training, where you can get modules for them to be trained. I always say, as a parent and as a teacher, I always just made an appointment to meet with each of my son's teachers, elementary, middle school, all of them, and just went through stuff, because my child's diabetes is probably very different than your child's diabetes. And my son would react to low sugars differently than somebody else's. So I think it's important that you take the time to set up those appointments and just say, hey, I know you're busy. I know you got a lot going on, but if you have a few minutes, I just would like to go over some key details specific to my son's diabetes and how, if you have concerns, you can contact me. If you have questions, I'm a resource. Please feel free to call and talk to me about it. I think that's very important that teachers know that you're available if they have questions. And we should be not shaming teachers for not knowing everything there is to know about diabetes. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And be sure you provide plenty of supplies, by the way. It's so important to have those supplies. So written plans. There are two key types of written plans parents and guardians should be aware of. The Diabetes Medical Management Plan, we've talked about that, the DMMP, and the Section 504, or other written accommodation plans. Students who are eligible for services under IDEA, which is that IEP, but the Individualized Educational Program, you need to be sure that you're getting that taken care of and get that in place. excuse me, I haven't talked this much since May. These written plans are essential to make sure the school meets the needs of your child in accordance to your provider's instructions. So, a lot of times schools here in Indiana, they want to just take that diabetes medical management plan, excuse me, and staple it to your doctor's medical management plan, and just take the medical management plan and say, hey, that's your 504. Whatever works, as long as it's being documented that your child has a 504 plan. It's very important. Okay, let's see. So now we're at the school plans for diabetes. So these slides detail 5 plans that schools commonly use to document and support delivery of care as it is presented by the student health care team. So you can see all these acronyms that I've been talking about, the DMMP, 504, IEP, IHP. We haven't talked about that, Individualized Healthcare Plan. So your school nurse gets your DMMP, and then they make it simplify it down. So it's just a specific individual healthcare plan, something that they can even do bullet points for the teacher of specific things. And then, of course, a quick reference tool for your school staff and how to recognize and treat hypo and hyper blood sugars. So all those are written out and sent and taken care of. I think that's, if you have any questions, I think we've really talked about all that. I always make my own quick reference tools sheet for my own son. Because I knew my child best. And so I would always say, this is how Hunter reacted when he had high sugar. This is what Hunter will do when he has low sugar, and just kind of help them through that. And a lot of times teachers would call me and say, hey, I think I know what you were talking about. I think I saw this and he was low. And when teachers call you or email you and say, hey, I noticed this and it worked, be sure that you say woohoo with your teacher and tell them how grateful and thankful that you are, and always be their cheerleader too, because they really do want to do what's best for your child. So we're going to talk about now our DMMP plan, and there is a new one out, a new one that's coming out for the new 2022-23 school year. The American Diabetes Association provides a sample diabetes medical management plan that can be shared with your child's diabetes provider. Many states I know have their own versions. I've seen, being from Southern Indiana, I have seen Kentucky's version, and I've seen Cincinnati, ours. There's all different versions, but if you can't find one, you can always go and get one off the ADA's website. It's a great one too. And I know a lot of the states have modeled theirs completely after this medical management plan. Be sure you schedule that visit with your child's provider to get this done. It is the end of July. If you're in Indiana, I know some Indianapolis schools are getting ready to start this week. So be sure you got that done. So next, we're going to talk about our plans and our healthcare for our healthcare provider orders. The DMMP is individualized for your child by his or her diabetes. And then we have the foundation for the development of your child's 504. This is what will be the groundwork, the foundation for us to do that 504 plan or IEP. So again, the DMMP is prepared by your doctor, and it's a comprehensive plan that discusses their medical management plan, supervision. The student requires medical doses, how to manage the lows and highs, what the threshold is for your child for low. Some of our kids are at 80. The older you get, it may drop to 70, all those specific things, and what to do on ketones, if there's ketones at school. All that is in that medical management plan. There also may be specific instructions for diabetes management during field trips, if they're an athlete, but It may be different for football season versus track season, show choir versus marching band, unplanned activities such as a school lockdown or a disaster. Diabetes management plans may be different for different levels of activities. So all that will be placed in that plan. And that can also be provided within that 504 or IEP as well. But you need to be sure the document gets signed by the student's medical provider. So diabetes medical plans and management plan provisions. You need to be sure it has that emergency contact information, the blood glucose monitoring, all those things that you see right there. All that needs to be placed in that DMMP. And I'm not going to read to you because you guys can see it all. But the key thing is level of care too. So what is a Section 504 plan? Parent and guardians should approach the development of their child's 504 plan accordingly and collaborate. That is, develop a plan even when things are going well. Even when things are going well, you still need to have a 504 plan. Principals, counselors, school nurse, I'm being a parent. They're going to tell you, you don't need it. We do everything you ask. No need to worry. Yes, worry. Because the moment that something goes wrong, you don't have backup. You don't have any legal protection if that plan is not in place. I cannot stress how important it is to have that 504 done the first day of school, no matter how great your school is. That is, develop a plan even when things are going well and the staff situation could change tomorrow. It could happen. Trust me, it's changing all the time. Accommodations should be reasonable. It is safer for your child if all is in writing and everyone understands the role. If it isn't written down, it didn't happen. Be sure it is written down. Your DMMP or healthcare plan is not a substitute for a 504. Your school will tell you this. You don't need one because we have your DMMP. It's the same as a 504. No, it is not. It is not the same. Be sure that you tell them, I want a Section 504 or an IEP. The additional benefits of having that 504 plan or an IEP, it gives validation of a health condition and what students need to function the best at school. And students better understand the accommodations that are available to them to focus on their education. It's also, as a teacher, I like a 504 plan because it's clearly written out what's expected of myself and what's expected of my student and what's expected of the parent. These plans utilize a formal legal process for determining how needs will be met and addressed, and addressing those needs that are not being met. Okay, so you need to be sure that all those things are addressed. So it addresses the needs that are not being met and that we want to be met. Provide students and parent guardians with the comfort of knowing that the student is safe and being treated fairly at school. We don't want our child, and this has happened, it's even happened to my child, we're having a birthday party and the teacher is like, oh, I didn't tell your mom. So why don't you go sit out in the hallway while we all have cupcakes? Or you can sit here, but you can't have any of the treats. That happens. You got to make sure that is all taken care of. The student and parent guardian can become better advocates by understanding the rights of the students with diabetes and what type of supports can be helpful to promote optimal learning, safety, and equal access. It is important for the school and family to work together to develop an individualized plan specific to your child. What works for one student with diabetes may not work for your student. So diabetes one does not fit all. I always say that. We always say, well, so-and-so did this. Well, that's great. That really works well for them, but it doesn't work for my child because of blah, blah, blah. So it's okay to advocate for your child. So let's go to the next slide. So navigating this process. So parents should contact the 504 IEP coordinator. You can just call the school secretary. She usually can direct you to where you need to go. Sometimes they call it special services or the SPED building that you'll need to speak to. Schools may initiate the development of a plan if they suspect the students needs special education or related services. An evaluation for eligibility under Section 504 or IEPs will be conducted by a school staff knowledgeable about your child. So be sure that you're getting these requests. Requests should always be confirmed in writing. In fact, it's always a good idea to keep a written log of all communications with the school when navigating through the 504 IEP process. I don't call on the phone. I always will either email, and in this day and age, I text, but email is best. It gives you a paper trail, and then there's no confusion about what was verbally said. It's very clear what was written, what was said. Like I said, the school, if they recognize that there's a learning disability or there's some other issues, they may initiate that 504 IEP meeting. School districts may require an individual assessment to determine if a child is eligible for services under these laws. Now, for a 504, that usually does not happen because your child should medical other, number 18. They should qualify. But for an IEP, they may want to go through some testing to find out if they qualify for an IEP. Once eligibility has been established, the team will convene to develop a written plan for your Section 504 or your IEP, your individualized educational program. The 504 and the IEP are important pieces of the diabetes toolbox for all students with diabetes. Don't wait until there is a problem. So, possible COVID-19 related content. With COVID, things got kind of crazy with our kids with diabetes and how we were going to treat kids virtually and how that would look for us. So with that, plans may include implementing community COVID-19 prevention strategies for our students, provide 2 separate clinics. So because of COVID, the school nurse should have a sick room and a health room or a wellness room. So our kids aren't being introduced to possible other illnesses, that they're clean and disinfecting the desks, the counters, all those great things, optimizing, ventilation, quality air. Do not share equipment like musical instruments, which they shouldn't be doing anyway, to be quite honest. So that's on your kids. And keyboard, don't share food. But if you have questions, go to diabetes.org/SAS COVID. Safe at School is the acronym COVID. And there's more information if you have issues with that. Be sure that 2 slides, please. The 2022-23 COVID-19 related action steps for parents and guardians. You just need to stay current on your routine vaccinations, to stay current on the ones you're supposed to be having and include those COVID-19 vaccinations. Check and comply with your school mask policy. Some schools are still having those. Be knowledgeable about current CDC guidelines and your school's policy. Encourage your child to take care of his or her diabetes. The best way to stay healthy is make sure we're taking good care of our blood sugars. Keep your sick kids home. That's always great. And, this is really hard on all our students. So if they need help mentally, please reach out to a health professional for social and emotional behavioral issues. So let's move to the next one. Key tips for parents, guardians, and all alike. Make sure your child's treatment plan is current. I can't say that enough. I think I've said it 100 times here. Make sure that it contains specific schedules. So that is a big deal. So if your child has PE first period of the day, you might want to make sure that you tell your doctor that's what they have the first period a day, because it may change up their insulin regimen some. Know which staff has been trained. You have every right to know who are the trained school personnel in your child's building. Be a resource for the school. While it's the school district's responsibility to train their staff, you may want to step up yourself. And you need to be sure you're providing all that equipment and food, low sugar, low blood sugars, water, all those things for your child at school. So we have a lot of resources that are available. So share resources and be a resource for your school nurse, principal, and teachers. Just be available and reach out and ask if they have any questions at all. There are a lot of Safe at School online resources at the diabetes.org/school training. I love that resource. I go there all the time. And if I have a new student with diabetes or a new teacher in my building that has a student with diabetes, I always refer them to this and go over the modules with them. Great things on that page. Let's talk about educate and post-secondary education. So couple of slides, please. I'm sorry. Our students do grow up and they do go on to college, which is scary, but exciting at the same time. You need to know that the association has a great comprehensive resource for students that are getting ready to go to college or university, trade school, vocational school, whatever. It covers the Section 504, the Americans Disability Act. It explains how to navigate that 504 process. It's very important. I want to talk about this quickly because if your child has a 504 in high school, it does travel with them to college. If you have a high school student who is a freshman, you need to start initiating things with your school counselor to get that 504 plan done, because if your child's taking the SAT or the ACT, the MCAT, LSATs, all those great things, they will have to have a 504 in place to get those accommodations to take those tests, because they can't walk in with their insulin or with their meter, with low blood sugar tests to take one of those college-bound tests. So you need to work on that now. Don't wait, because it is a process. Sometimes it goes fast, sometimes not so much. But there's a great secondary guide related resource. So, and that is at diabetes.org college rights. And we have some other resources for childcare. If your child is young and needs to have childcare at school. One more slide, please. These resources are intended for those kids that are caring for our younger kids. So we're almost done here. So let's go over our next steps for parents and guardians. So what do you do now? Where do you even start? One, you are your child's best advocate, and you will be their advocate forever. Doesn't matter how old they are. But be sure that you have all the tools that you need to help your child understand your school district's COVID policies, and consult with your child's diabetes provider to determine what is best for your kid. Check out our Safe at School website page. Schedule a meeting with that school nurse as soon as possible. I would get off this webinar when we're done and send an email to the school nurse and principal to get that ball rolling. And if you haven't already got that, talk to your endocrinologist or your CDE, your certified diabetes educator, to get that diabetes medical management plan. You need to do that ASAP and get that 504 process going. So, the best way to formulate a safe and healthy school year for your child with diabetes is to plan, to educate, to train, to communicate, and teamwork. That is what makes a safe and healthy school year for our students. And if you can do it. Next slide, please. So we have some upcoming Safe at School events. We have a great event happening July 28th. It's a virtual expert panel. Be sure you get registered for that. And the ADA will be co-hosting a national back to school panel with JDRF and Samson Diabetes Research Institute on August 9th as well. So we hope that you will join us for that. So are there any questions? And there is a slide with links to everything that we talked about today. But are there any questions that we have right now?
Hi, Kathy. Great job. Lots of comprehensive, very helpful information. So thanks very much. I have a couple questions to ask.
Yeah, sure.
So what if the child is a straight A student? Is this child still eligible for a 504 plan?
Yes, you may get pushback. My son was that student. He straight A kid, didn't struggle in school, but he qualifies for a 504 plan. And so be sure if the school is telling you no, they're incorrect, that he does or she does qualify for a 504. Now, an IEP plan, they may not qualify for that unless their diabetes is really impacting their learning. But if your child's a straight A student, they seem to be doing okay.
Okay. So if everything's going well at school, principals on board, school nurses on board, teachers are on board, everything's going well, why should my child get a 504 plan? Does he or she still need a 504 plan if everything's going well? What's the benefit?
The benefit, one, is that while things are going well, let's get it done. If everybody's getting along and everything's working well, then let's get it down in writing. It shouldn't be a big deal. But I will tell you, when things could go south very quickly. It just takes a change in personnel, a new principal, a new teacher, a school nurse moves out and a new one moves in, and everything gets a little out of whack. It's best to get it done so there isn't a disruption in your child's care and that everything goes smoothly. And if they say, oh, not a problem, I would just keep saying, I know we don't have a problem. Let's keep it that way. Let's just keep everything great and do a 504 plan just to keep it happy. And the other thing is too, I can't stress enough, with all our standardized testing, you need to have that 504 plan done so your child can get accommodations for iStep, iRead, all those things that we're doing in Indiana. It's so important.
Yeah, very good. So at the association, our Center for Information intakes many calls and emails from parents of children with diabetes who are facing challenges at school. And one challenge I often hear about is with field trips. And I often hear from parents who have been told by their child's school that if the parent doesn't come along on the field trip, or if the parent doesn't attend varsity football practice after school, that their child can't go on the field trip and their child can't participate in football practice. So why don't you talk about that a little bit? What is the school's obligation to provide care at extracurricular events and field trips and off-campus activities?
If the school is sponsoring it, then they are responsible for providing care. So if it's a school dance, if the school nurse can't be there, then it is their responsibility to have a trained school personnel, someone trained to take care of your child while at that event. If your child is on the football team, and I know this because my son was, we had to make sure that the athletic trainer was available and was there, and the football coach, who also was a school teacher, was trained to take care of my son. If your son or daughter misses to go to a doctor's appointment, and they have that rule about missing a half a day, you can't participate in athletics, that does not apply to your kid. because he was doing something for his diabetes, and they still should be able to go and participate in practice or that game that day. It is very important. That's why that 504 plan is so important to have in place. But don't let them tell you that your child can't attend something, go to the Children's Museum unless you go. That's not okay. They must provide.
Okay. Kathy, how are treats at parties and special events usually handled?
I know school districts handle it a lot of different ways. Some school districts don't even have parties anymore, but we always try. When my kids were young with Hunter, I always tried to say, if there was going to be a party, try to give me advance notice, and then I would know that Hunter needed to change his insulin pump dose, or we would send an alternate snack if that was what you wanted to do. But I always said to let him have the treat, participate, and then we'll dose for whatever was given. Because I always wanted my child to feel normal, whatever normal is anymore. So, but every parent has a different feeling about that. But the school should let you know ahead of time if there's going to be a party in the class, because we all know ahead of time. We do. Parents just don't show up with snacks. We don't do that anymore. It used to be when I was at school that would happen, but not anymore. I mean, yeah, but not anymore. They should know in advance, and they should let you know.
Okay. And you and I both know, because we have grown children with diabetes, we know that our kids mature and they become very capable and independent in managing their own diabetes. So once our kids achieve independence, is there a need to continue to have trained staff available at school or at field trips?
Yes, always, because our kids things could change in a minute. Things could change. Even at high school football, college, all those things, middle school, even our kids who have had diabetes really young, things could go wrong at any time. So it's really important to have the trained staff all the time. And I know some of our older kids want to do pushback, especially our middle school kids. They don't want to be seen as different, and they don't want to, it's hard to fit in to begin with. So, but we need to be also telling our child that it's important that they advocate for themselves, and that it's important that they educate their classmates. We should not, this is my opinion, I always raised my kid not to be ashamed that he had it, and that he took it to educate his kids in his classroom. And many times Hunter would be having a low blood sugar on the football field, and he wouldn't even know it, but his classmates had been with him for so long, they would recognize it before Hunter would, and would call a timeout or give him low blood sugar. So I think it's really important that we do that.
So I'm glad you mentioned low blood sugar or hypoglycemia. What do you think about trained staff, or about staff being trained to give glucagon if ordered by the student's DMNP?
I think
is that a critical component to the diabetes care plan?
I think it's critical, because I've taught for so long. I always use this example with my teachers and my principals whenever I'm doing a training. And I practice a fire drill 3 times a year. I've been a teacher and I've yet to have a fire in my building, but I still practice and know what to do in case there's a fire in my building. I do tornado drills. I do lockdown drills. I do all these things just in case. It's so important that we have trained staff that know what to do and how to administer that glucagon just in case. May not happen. Knock on wood. I mean, my son's had diabetes for 18 years. I hope I don't jinx him. I'm knocking on everything, but we were lucky we haven't had to do that. So, but it's better to be prepared. I know what to do, and so should they.
And absolutely. And in Indiana, state law permits someone other than a school nurse to give glucagon and to give insulin. Is that correct, Kathy?
Yes, and there are modules. Our teachers go on Vectrin now to do all our safe at school training with epilepsy and blood pathogens training that we're required to do suicide. Diabetes is one of those. And if your school is not providing that school safe, school training to know how to deal with insulin and glucagon, all those things, then you need to ask. Just ask, is that part of their training on Vectrin with their safe at school?
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. I think that we'll start winding down our program. We're almost out of time here. This has been wonderful. We thank everybody for attending this evening's Safe at School workshop. We hope the guidance and information provided has been helpful to you as we continue to work together to make sure students with diabetes are medically safe at school and treated fairly. Kathy, again, thanks so much for sharing your knowledge, your experience, your passion, and your time with us this evening. Please know your American Diabetes Association is here for you. A link to this session will soon be made available for watching again and for sharing with others. Be sure to register for our Safe at School expert panel on July 28th that Kathy mentioned, and also our Samsung panel where we're partnering with Samsung Diabetes Research Institute and JERF to give another expert panel, and all those registrations are available at diabetes.org/safe-at-school. And again, many thanks to Lilly Diabetes for its support of this evening's virtual program. Have a good evening, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.